Hello, welcome to the lecture on aromatic substitution reactions. So in this lecture we will discuss a specific form of substitution called electrophilic aromatic substitution, and then we'll see different versions of this substitution with regard to halogens, sulfonation, nitration, Friedel-Crafts alkylation, Friedel-Crafts acylation, and finally we'll see what are deactivating groups and deactivating groups. So let's start with electrophilic aromatic substitution. So we generally have seen before that when you take a single cyclohexene, this results in bromination, which results in anti-addition. But because of the stability of the aromatic ring and the resonance of that aromatic ring, bromination cannot occur directly and it does not undergo bromination. So these aromatic pi bonds, because they are less reactive, they can cause they are less reactive than the general typical alkenes. So however, one element that can change this is by introduction of iron. So iron is an electron deficient molecule, and when it is introduced, a substitution reaction will occur. So for example, if you take a look at this reaction where you add bromine, so what is happening here is it's replacing the proton with a bromine in the presence of iron. This reaction is called as an electrophilic aromatic substitution. So, and let's take an example. Let's take a look at why this occurs and how to. So remember that here the aromatic proton is replaced by an electrophile. So if you remember, before we discussed the topic of two compounds, an electrophile and a nucleophile. An electrophile is a compound that likes electrons and is ready to accept an electron pair. So if you remember, nucleophile is a compound which likes to donate an electron pair. So with this difference in mind, let's talk about electrophilic aromatic substitution, or EAS for short, is where an aromatic proton is replaced by an electrophile. Here the ring acts as a nucleophile. So here the nucleophile gets attacked by the electrophile. So one that donates the protons is getting attacked by the one that accepts proton. And whenever you take this ring structure, when you take benzene, the common reactions are halogenation, nitration, sulfonation, and alkylation and acylation. So these are the common reactions that you're going to see in this lecture. The main purpose of electrophilic aromatic substitution is to make sure that you're not changing the aromaticity of the ring. So the aromaticity of the ring stays as the same, it does not change. The only thing that changes is the aromatic proton. So let's start with halogenation. So in bromination of an alkene, so we saw that bromine itself functions as an electrophile. How does it do that? So as bromine comes closer and closer, so let's take a simple example of the alkene. So if you look at an alkene, and if there is a bromine that generally comes closer and closer, so as it comes closer and closer, bromine creates a transient dipole, because it notices there is an electron, there is a increase in the number of electrons there. Bromine starts to come closer and closer. It donates its electron pair back to bromine, and as the electrons are moving away from the first bromine here, so this gains a partially positive charge and this gains a partially negative charge, but it's not fully taken out, but it's generally a partially positive and a partially negative charge, and it regains its structure once it goes away from this structure. That's why the name a transient dipole, meaning that it's only existent when it comes closer to the nucleophilic ring. But it does not happen the same way when you have an alkane, when you have an aromatic ring. The main reason is because in the aromatic ring the electrons are delocalized. So because they are delocalized, they stay throughout the entire compound, not like an alkene where it's in one simple region. So to enhance this ability of the molecule to become an electrophile, we use a Lewis acid as a catalyst. So the Lewis acid here that we use is iron. So it makes bromine electrophilic enough to be attacked by the more stable p electrons in the aromatic ring. So the common material that is used is ferric bromide, where you use iron plus bromine to create ferric bromide, which is a Lewis acid catalyst. So what happens when you have a Lewis acid catalyst? So I already told you that iron bromide is an electron deficient atom. So iron bonds with 3 bromines. If you look at the iron structure, it does not have an octet yet. So when a bromine comes closer to it, it likes to achieve that octet. So when the reaction occurs, the iron here, ferric bromide, bonds with the atom bromine, so Br2, and because it has more electrons than it is needed, so it gains a partial, so it gains a negative charge, and the bromine here gets a positive charge. So it does not want the positive charge, so what it does is it donates the electrons, so it takes the electrons from this bromine and results in a positive charge on that, the other bromine. So this results in FeBr minus, and a bromine molecule with just 6 electrons coming out of the structure with a positive charge. This bromine is the one that acts as the electrophile. So what is happening here is this acting as a catalyst is facilitating in the electrophile formation. So we will see why this negative charge is important as well. So we will come back to this at the end of the structure. Now let's take a look at how the bromination of benzene will occur. So let's take a simple benzene molecule. So in this benzene molecule you have a proton. So this proton first, so what happens here is you have this entire structure of ferric bromide with a negative charge on the iron and a bromine with a positive charge. So the bromine with the positive charge attacks, so remember here, nucleophile is the one that attacks the electrophile always. This is the idea behind. Electrons always attack the bromine. So now these 2 electrons will attack the bromine, causing it to form an intermediate structure which looks somewhat like this, where the hydrogen and the bromine are actually on the same structure, but notice that the double bond is gone, so this becomes 2 electrons here, 2 electrons here. But the one that loses the electrons, so notice that there are 2 carbons that are, so these are the 2 carbons. So when this carbon takes up the electrons, when this carbon becomes positively charged. So what it does is it undergoes resonance. So because of the resonance, it undergoes what we call a sigma change, where the positive charge always moves towards the most stable carbon. So the most stable carbon is the one either that has the structure, so which is closest to the double bond. So what happens here is that either, so you will have the double bond shift here, which can cause positive charge here, and the double bond here, and the double bond here, causing it to still have bromine here, and it still undergoes again resonance. The more it resonates, the more it stabilizes. So again, what happens here? This this comes here. So the positive charge goes here. You have the rho bond here, and so this is called as the sigma complex. So this is an intermediate that forms in the structure, and for it to form the rest of the reaction, it still has to undergo further reaction. So what is the further reaction here is, notice the compound that we left at the start, this compound here. So bromine, because it has higher electronegativity, it generally attracts its own electron pair towards itself. So what happens here is bromine, one of the bromines here, so let me write it down here. So FeBr3, and the other bromine here will gain a negative charge. So this bromine here, it takes its electron pairs and attacks one of the protons. So when it attacks one of the protons, what happens here is these two combine and form HBr, and replacing the original structure FeBr3. But notice the final structure that originally was there, it just took the proton, but it did not take the electron pair. So this is the electron pair that stays there. So now you have an electron pair. So what happens here is the structure now has a bromine and also has an electron pair with a negative charge and a positive charge on the other end, with a bond structure that looks somewhat like this. So what happens now is, to compensate, these two electrons will go and form the double bond, causing it to form the final structure. The final bond. So this here is the idea behind bromination. So bromination always occurs, whatever the reaction happens, bromination will never stop, bromination will always occur, provided it has a catalyst. That catalyst is ferric bromide. Remember that a catalyst should not involve in the reaction, so notice that it still ends up becoming ferric bromide at the final part. This then again bonds with another bromine, causing it to further enhance the reaction. So the total byproduct of this reaction, where you started with the benzene, in presence of ferric bromide, notice that resonance will occur, meaning that it's going to change its resonance structure, and the bromine will attach in the place of the proton. So this is the aromatic proton, so it gets substituted with a bromine, and the byproducts are, you end up getting HBr. So if you look at the original reaction, so this is how it would look like. So this is there are two steps. One is the step where you have a nucleophilic attack, where the nucleophile on the benzene ring attacks the bromine to form the sigma complex, and then you have a proton transfer. So the proton transfer attacks the proton, so removes the proton structure, now results in the final structure formation. So this is the two steps that are involved in the reaction. Step 1 is the aromatic ring attacking the electrophile and the formation of the sigma complex. Step 2 is the deprotonation of the sigma complex, which undergoes rearomatization. So once you rearomatize, it becomes back to the benzene ring and it undergoes bromination. So addition reactions in general to an aromatic ring would be endargonic, which means that they take much more energy, and they are generally not reactions where they would absorb more energy than they would release energy. But the substitution generally is a reaction where it would release energy than absorb energy. So which is generally why substitution is the one that's more commonly observed in place of addition reactions. Addition reactions are not commonly the ones that occur in aromatic rings, because aromatic rings always want to retain its stability of aromatization. So which means that they will want to stay as an aromatic ring. So the same thing happens, you can also try the same reaction with aluminum bromide. It also acts the exact same way, because aluminum tribromide is also a Lewis acid catalyst, so which can also do the same exact mechanism in place of ferric bromide. So you still end up with, the next one is chlorination where you use Cl2, where you use aluminum trichloride. Remember that the compound that you are using must have similarity with the catalyst that you are using. So you cannot use AlCl3 as a catalyst for bromination. The reason is because the structure does not work well, and you cannot do halogenation with fluorine or iodine. The main reason is because fluorination is too violent, because fluorination is too high energy production, and iodination is generally slow because it does not produce enough yield. So generally halogenation occurs only with chlorine and bromine. Remember that when you want to use when you want to add bromine, you have to use ferric bromide or aluminum bromide, aluminum tribromide. If you want to use chlorine, we have to use aluminum trichloride. So whatever the compound is must have similarity with the catalyst that you use. So again the same reaction, the nucleophilic attack first results in chlorination. So you have two compounds that are attached, and the positive charge always resonates until it finds a most stable carbon, and finally the proton gets attacked by the chlorine that's attached to aluminum trichloride, causing it to form rearomatize at the end. So three main things: nucleophilic attack, sigma complex, and proton transfer. And finally you can also write the last step, rearomatization. So it becomes an aromatic ring again. So in fact all EAS mechanisms generally are the ones that follow the same two-step mechanism. So first step is the nucleophilic attack, where the electrophile gets attacked by the two pairs. So the double bond on the aromatic ring acts as an electrophile, nucleophile, and you end up with two compounds there, and the positive charge rearranges until it finds one that's closest to the stable carbon, so closest to the more substituted carbon. So the positive charge tries to move towards the most stable compound. Next, finally it undergoes proton transfer in the presence of a base. The base here is the product that you left out when you created the electrophile. So next let's continue our topic on sulfonation. So sulfonation is the process where SO3 sulfur trioxide acts as the electrophile and the H2SO4 acts as the acid catalyst. So whenever you see this, you will see it as a fuming H2SO4. Fuming H2SO4 is basically H2SO4 plus SO3. So whenever you see this, remember that fuming H2SO4 means that it is H2SO4 plus SO3. Then why is SO3 an electrophile? Notice that it originally has 12 carbons around it, which means that it's an electron withdrawing atom. Why is it that why is it not a nucleophile than an electrophile? One of the problems is you have a double bond between an s orbital, sulfur and oxygen. Sulfur has its electron pair in 3p and oxygen has an electron pair in 2p orbital. So if you take a sulfur molecule, sulfur has a larger double bond ring and 2p orbitals are smaller. Because of the uneven pi bond, so this double bond here, so S-O bond has a single bond character because of the uneven charge that is present on S and sulfur and oxygen. So even though that, notice that even if you have a 3p orbitals, these two can bond together easily, but the bonding here is uneven and it cannot bond properly, clearly. So that's why rather than behaving like a double bonded structure, it behaves like a single bonded structure where sulfur ends up becoming partially, so the entire molecule becomes partially positive. So this results in, so when you end up putting it in sulfur, H2SO4, it increases the electrophilicity and causes it to become more positive. So let's take an example of how this occurs and how the mechanism what the mechanism looks like. So you start with benzene. So this is the aromatic proton and it gets attacked, so it attacks SO3. So the double bond attacks SO3, causes it to form the sigma complex. Remember, the reactions are all the same, so you don't have any change in the reactions. So hydrogen. Remember that there are two hydrogens, so which means that if this bonds, so this becomes positively charged. So this becomes positively charged, and here you end up getting H2SO3. And this undergoes further resonance. So where this moves here, where the positive charge comes here. Now again, you have so this double bond moving here causes it to have a positive charge here, and you end up with double bond here and double bond here, hydrogen. So notice that sulfur here is more than the electrons that it wants, so sulfur becomes positively charged. So this is the sigma complex that creates, so sulfur becomes negatively charged, I'm sorry, because it has more than electron pairs that it wants. Next, what happens now? It undergoes deprotonation. The deprotonation occurs because of the H2SO4. So now the H2O that is present in H2SO4 so attacks the proton, so resulting in the proton going out and these two electrons coming back to the original structure. So which means that these two electrons are also there, so which undergoes rearomatization. So notice that this is the compound now, where you have two electrons as well as sulfur with a negative charge. So the negative charge does not want to stay there, so what it will do now is it will go back to form the ring. So between the positive and negative, it forms the ring back again. Now the sulfur with a negative charge now, it looks at the oxygen, so the H3O plus molecule that has 3 hydrogens with a positive charge. Notice that this is a negative charge, so what happens now is the negative charge goes to one of the oxygens. So the oxygen then attacks one of the protons on the H3O plus and causes it to form SO3H. SO3H. So this is the final structure. So this process is the sulfonate that we are talking about. So this is how the final product ends up forming. So the reaction is generally highly sensitive between benzene and SO3. Is a two-way street, meaning that when you use a benzene in the presence of a fuming and concentrated H2SO4, that undergoes sulfonation. But the reverse can also occur, where the compound backs the reverse formation again. This is when it is a dilute H2SO4, then it brings back and forms the benzene reaction again. Because of this reason, SO3H is used as what we call as a blocking agent. So we'll come back to this at the end of this lecture, at the end of the next lecture, at the end of this particular chapter, when we discuss why we need to use something as a blocking agent that you need. So this is the example of sulfonation, and this is how sulfonation occurs. So next, let's go to nitration. So nitration is a process that occurs when you use nitric acid as a source of the electrophile. Where is the source of the electrophile here? The source of the electrophile is NO2 plus, or the nitronium ion. The nitronium ion, which causes it to form the structure. Notice that nitronium forms a triple bond but the oxygen here ends up getting a negative charge. So which means that the nitrogen here, even though it has two lone pair of electrons there, it still ends up becoming, a compound that is much more electrophilic than nucleophilic. So let's take an example of how nitration works. So let's start with the formation of the nitronium ion. So H2NO3 is a compound that looks somewhat like this. So this is the structure of H2NO3, so HNO3. And this, when reacted in the presence of H2SO4, remember that H2SO4 is a large compound. So because yes, the H2SO4 is much more of a stronger acid than HNO3, so it undergoes proton attack. So the OH here, the oxygen here, attacks the proton, so leaving the electrons back into the structure again. So this creates a intermediate compound. So an intermediate compound where you have the oxygen that's attached to two hydrogens with a positive charge and two lone pairs of electrons. So it does not want to be positive, so it takes its electrons away and moves out. So when it takes its electrons and moves out, it creates, so when you get minus H2O, so this entire structure is removed, then you end up with nitrogen that has three lone pairs with a negative charge on one end and double bond oxygen on one end, where the nitrogen ends up becoming positively charged because it loses its two pairs of electrons. So this is the pair of electrons that it lost. So now what happens here, this structure now where the electron pair goes here and this electron pair goes to the oxygen. This creates the fundamental problem with nitronium ion, where you have a double bonded structure on one end, so it ends up becoming positively charged because of this reason. So notice the structure of nitronium now. It's a positively charged ion, so it acts as the electrophile. So let's take a look at the reaction and how it works. So first, the aromatic ring, acting as a nucleophile, so will attack the electrophile. So the electrophile here is NO2 plus so it attacks the electrophile. So notice that this is the one that attacks and this is the one that loses the electron pair, so which means that this becomes positively charged. So you have a structure where you have positive charge on here and a hydrogen with nitrogen double bonded to two oxygens. Now this structure, notice the positive charge here does not stay stable because it resonates, so this structure goes here. The positive charge comes here, double bond and double bond with hydrogen and double bond O. Then again it resonates again, so this comes here, so the positive charge will come. So the positive charge will come here. Now you have a bond here and a bond here. So what happens next is it undergoes, so in presence of water, because we are using an acid, it becomes acidic, so where it attacks the proton and causes it to form H3O plus. H3O plus, and the byproduct here is going to be NO2 with the aromatic rings undergoing rearomatization. So this is the final structure So this is how you end up with. So this compound is called nitrobenzene, and this is the process of nitration. So this is the process of nitration, how the reaction occurs here. So these three compounds here are the sigma complex, and notice this is the first one, which is the nucleophilic attack, and this is the proton transfer, so causing it to form the final structure. Now, so what you can do with nitration is that nitration in itself is a process. Notice that we are actually adding oxygen, so which means that you have two oxygens there. So if you undergo further reaction in presence of iron or zinc and HCl, and then further react it with NaOH, it undergoes reduction to form nitrazine, where in place of NO2 you get NH2. So this is the reaction that generally occurs. So when you want to create the final group rather than nitration, you want to add an amino group here. So the three steps of this reaction are: so the first step is HNO3 and H2SO4. The second step is ferrous or zinc and HCl. The third is NaOH, which creates the final compound NH2. So this is the final reaction that you can use to create the structure. Now try another example and see if you can find the reaction. So pause the video right here and try to see if you can draw the mechanism for this reaction here. So pause the video and try to solve this problem. So the next one is Friedel-Crafts alkylation. So the focus of an alkylation reaction is to add an alkyl group as an electrophile. So we are trying to add an alkyl group as an electrophile. So alkylation occurs when you use an alkyl halide as the electrophile and AlCl3 aluminum trichloride as the Lewis acid catalyst. So provided you have to use the proper catalyst for the proper alkyl halide. So when you have a chloride, chlorohalide, you have to add aluminum chloride. When you have a bromohalide, you have to add a ferric bromide. So let's take an example of this reaction and let's see how the reaction works. So let's start with the common concept here. So the simple concept of the reaction here is you have a benzene ring. So in the benzene ring now, you have, so the entire reaction is that when you have an alkyl halide, so let's say for example I have 2-chlorobutane and I'm adding it in presence of AlCl3, the final reaction is such that the entire structure attaches itself in the presence of the aromatic proton, causing it to form the structure that we have there. So we basically added a butyl group onto the structure. So this is the reaction in total. So let's take a look at how the reaction works and how the carbocation actually forms. So let's start with the compound that we have taken right now, which is 2-chlorobutane. So when 2-chlorobutane reacts with AlCl3, so remember that aluminum is an electron deficient molecule. So because it likes electrons, so what happens now is it bonds with the aluminum. So the chlorine tries to bond with aluminum, causing the reaction to form So now the chlorine now tries to get its own electron pair. So because it does not want to be positively charged, so notice that it becomes positively charged, aluminum becomes negative. So it does not want to be positively charged. So what happens here is this compound now takes its point away. So with left out with so as it leaves, the chlorine regains its 2 electrons. Aluminum stays negatively charged, and the compound here has a positive charge. So notice that this compound here is the electrophile. So the alkyl group here acts as the electrophile. So the electrophile here is the carbocation. So the electrophile group here is the carbocation. So the carbocation acts as the electrophile. So let's take a look at this mechanism. Again, it's similar to the other mechanisms that we discussed before. So the alkylation here occurs in the presence of, so you have a benzene ring. So you have a proton. So now in the presence of the structure, now you have an electrophile structure, which is this carbocation with a positive charge here. So the nucleophile attacks the positive charge and bonds with it. So because this is the carbon that bonds, so this one ends up becoming positively charged. So one side you have hydrogen, on the other side you have a compound that you have bonded with. Right. So it always tries to bond in such a way that there is more space on one side, so which means that on this side it forms. So you have a structure formation. So these 2 lone pairs will stay there. Now again there is sigma movement due to resonance, so causing it to form the positive charge to move from one point to the other. So this electron pair moves here, so the positive charge comes here, and you have hydrogen. And now the first compound that we left out, which is AlCl4, so AlCl3 with 1 chlorine. So this attacks the proton, so leading it to form HCl. So it leaves in the form of HCl. And the compound undergoes rearomatization and forms the structure that is needed. So finally ends up with a stable structure where you have a benzene ring, right? So sterically benzene plus you end up with HCl and plus you end up with AlCl. So this is the final reaction that occurs here. Notice that we are basically adding an alkyl group. So this process is called Friedel-Crafts alkylation. So this process is called Friedel-Crafts alkylation. So this can happen with many compounds. You can make any compound into an electrophilic agent provided it's an alkyl halide. So there are multiple compounds that you can do with. So simple halides can be used effectively because provided they are simple, meaning that the electrophilic agent is easier to form. So most primary alkyl halides are generally susceptible to a problem of rearrangement, where the positive charge shifts to the more stable carbon. Rather than staying at the primary carbon, it tries to move to the secondary carbon, and it always forms a secondary carbocation. So even though the compound is a primary alkyl halide, you end up in a major amount with a secondary alkyl halide because of the hydride shift. So where the hydrogen moves from one point to the other point, causing the positive charge to move to the secondary, the more stable carbon. So causing it to form a rearranged product. So even though it's a primary alkyl halide. So there are 3 other limitations with this Friedel-Crafts alkylation. One, the halide, which is the leaving group, must always be attached to an sp3 hybridized carbon, which means that if you have a compound chlorine that's attached to an sp2 hybridized compound, it will never undergo this reaction. The same thing with benzyl halides and acyl halides. The reaction will not occur here. Sorry, vinyl halides. The next one is polyalkylation is another problem that often results, and polyalkylation always commonly results in para compounds. So most often results in polyalkylation. So one another problem is some substituted aromatic rings such as nitrobenzene are generally too deactivated to react. So nitrobenzene here, or the nitro group on this, is a deactivating group which causes the reaction not to occur. So which means that this reaction, some compounds, some substituted rings will not undergo Friedel-Crafts alkylation. So we will see why at the end of this lecture, but this is the simple limitations of Friedel-Crafts alkylation. So to overcome this, we use Friedel-Crafts acylation as a different method. So acylation and alkylation both are ones that we use a new carbon-carbon bond. But the difference here is that in alkylation we use an alkyl group to add, in acylation we use an acyl group. An acyl group is basically a double bond structure with a side chain. So we have a carbon double bond O or a carbonyl group. So we are always starting to add a carbonyl group and then end up with the structure. Even acylation reactions are also catalyzed by aluminum trichloride, which acts as the Lewis acid. So for example, if you take a general structure here, in place of chlorine you end up attaching this carbon directly onto. So this carbon gets directly attached to the carbon in the presence, it substitutes in presence of the aromatic proton. So let's take a look at a general ion and how the acylinium ion forms. So this is the acyl compound. So in presence of AlCl3, so the chlorine attaches itself to aluminum, causing it to form an intermediate structure. So the chlorine now takes its electrons and goes out. So the R C double bond O structure ends up becoming positively charged, with the carbon getting the positive charge. Because notice that all others are satisfied, but only carbon is the one that's unsatisfied with only 3 bonds. So this is the acylinium ion. So this acylinium ion acts as the electrophile. And this AlCl4 acts as the deprotonating agent. Right, these are two things that end up useful in the reaction. So you start with the structure. Notice that the carbon here is a positively charged structure, but because of the lone pair that's right after the positively charged, so adjacent to a carbocation, so it undergoes resonance as well, where it can become resonance stabilized to form the structure. But because the problem here is that triple bonds are not always stable, they generally end up going back to the original structure again. So you end up with a carbon structure where the carbon gets the electrons. So now the carbon gets attacked and bonds with the carbon. So once it bonds with the carbon, so you end up with a sigma complex, and then once in the sigma complex, finally it undergoes deprotonation. Deprotonation finally reacts with the formation of the acyl group. So this is the acylation mechanism. Again, all of the mechanisms that we saw here are all the same mechanism, provided you have two processes. One is the nucleophilic attack, and so first is the nucleophilic attack and second is the proton transfer. So the same mechanisms provided with a sigma complex in the middle. So in Friedel-Crafts acylation, you start with an acyl group. So some alkyl groups cannot be attached to the ring by Friedel-Crafts alkylation because of the rearrangement. So one way to do that is by following the Clemmensen reduction, where you start with acylation and you end up doing Clemmensen reduction to finally create a primary bonded long chain structures. For example, when you take the compound that we are using here and attach it, when you further reduce it in presence of zinc, amalgamated zinc and HCl, it undergoes and finally forms a primary bonded structure without any hydride shift. So this is called Clemmensen reduction. So what we do here is, in place of Friedel-Crafts alkylation, to overcome the problems that we saw in alkylation, we first do acylation and then do Clemmensen reduction to finally create the create the compound without any rearrangement. So acylation plus Clemmensen reduction creates no rearrangements, provided the double bond is bonded to the primary carbon that we are using here. So unless it's bonded to the primary carbon, it does not undergo this reaction. Now, one of the problems with polyalkylation is so one of the problems with alkylation was polyalkylation, where you had multiple groups attached. But polyacylation is one that generally not observed because of the structural stability and because of the energy required. So the reaction will not occur. So the polyacylation will not occur. So with that we end Friedel-Crafts acylation. So try these examples for both. So these examples are for alkylation and these are examples of acylation. So try these problems and see if you can understand how the mechanism works and how whether it is necessary in any of these reactions that you have any doubts. So try to pause the video right here and try to solve this problem. So next let's continue on activating groups. So there are two issues that arise when you are adding a group to a ring which is already possessing one or more substituents. So for example, consider the nitration of toluene. Toluene is methylbenzene. So if you take methylbenzene, what is the effect of the methyl group on the rate of nitration? So the first thing we know is that this methyl group is an electron donating group, which makes the ring a better nucleophile, which means that it's going to end up making a reaction for sure. But the second question is, what is the regioselectivity? Regioselectivity is there are three possible points. This is the ortho position, this is the meta position, and this is the para position. Notice that there are two orthos and two meta positions and one para position. So where will the compound attach to? Where will the nitro compound attach to? So there are three possible products that you will end up when you add a nitro group, so that you can install in the ortho, meta or para position. So this brings up to the point that when you use nitro, the ortho and para products generally predominate, with very little meta product that is going to end up forming when you have a disubstitution. This brings up the question, how do you compare the stability of the sigma complex? So because the sigma complex is the one that decides where the group attaches. So where the group attaches. So it's always going to attach when the positive charge is on the more substituted carbon. So in all of the sigma complexes that you end up with, only these two structures are where you see the positive charge on the more substituted carbon, which has 3 bonds without any protons. So which means that those are the places where it's going to predominantly form the structure. So notice that in any other structure there is no presence of positive charge on that particular carbon, because if that particular carbon does not have the positive charge, which means that it is an unstable compound that you end up with. So these are the two and the only cases where you end up with a positive charge on the more substituted carbon, which means those two will predominate. So this brings up the question is that the sigma complex that you obtain from ortho or para has a positive charge delocalized adjacent to the electron donating CH3 group. So which gives it a more stable sigma complex intermediate. So where if you take an ortho attack, the energy that is required to go up is much less, meta attack is much higher, so there is not much product formed. but when you have para attack, it's the least, so which means that the more of the product will be para. So when you take the final compound, you end up with ortho 63%, para 34%, and meta 3%. We also notice that there is more ortho that is found because of the presence of two ortho positions than one para position. So I already told you that in a compound you generally have two ortho positions, so which means that ortho and so all these three positions have the same probability of forming. Because there are two ortho positions, which means each have 33% each, which means that more of this will end up forming an ortho structure and less of it will form on the para structure because there is only one para structure, so which will end up giving 34%. So now you understand why ortho is predominating, because it has more positions in it. So there are two positions of ortho, which means that there are two positions of where ortho will form, and only one position of para where only one less amount of para will form, even though para has lesser energy that required to achieve the top range. Next one is the methoxy group. Methoxy group in anisole is an activator that activates 400 times more than the benzene itself. Because of the presence of the oxygen has delocalized negative charge and undergoes resonance. That resonance creates much larger electron density and causes it to have resonance throughout the entire structure. So which means that here, where will the structure end up forming? The methoxy group is activating the ring so strong that a Lewis acid catalyst is not necessary at all. If you just use the bromine directly, even that will end up forming ortho and para groups. So one way to remember this, any activator is an ortho or para director. An activator is an ortho or ortho para director. And when you have a compound that you end up with, so anisole, so CH3 group, OCH3 group are activating and generally are ortho para directors. So here para is the major because ortho position is being sterically hindered. So which means that now the question comes back, where will the product form? Depending on the structure, it will always form in the less hindered ortho or para positions. So whichever has less hindered, sterically less hindered, that will end up forming more of the compound. Here para is the more less hindered structure, meaning that the nitrogen, so NO2 here does not have to hide in presence of OCH3, but nitro here is much more freer, so that's why more of the para compound will form. So this is the reason why you end up seeing the charge here. So notice the positive charge here, rather than in the carbon, it's actually on the oxygen, because remember that positive charge likes to be on the more electronegative compound. So now this is how you end up with the ortho and meta para structures. So all of the activators are ortho para directors. So whenever you have an activator, it ends up becoming an ortho para director. So let's take a simple example of this reaction, and they're asking you to. So let's take a simple example of this. So next let's talk about deactivating groups. So what are deactivating groups here? So the nitro group is an example of a deactivating group. So because it's inductively electron withdrawing and also withdraws the electron density from the ring. Remember that the one that provides the electron density to the ring creates a activating group. NO2 group here is electron withdrawing, as well as it also withdraws the electron negativity from the electron density from the ring towards itself. So here if you draw the charge resonance structure, you end up with an upward rather than being a downward one. So a downward one is an activating group, and upward one is a deactivating group. So a deactivating group always it will never create a positive charge on the carbon. So it will always create the positive charge on the carbon that's most stable here, which means that it's more meta-directing than anything else. So nitrobenzene undergoes nitration 100,000 times slower than benzene. The reason mainly is because the further the nitration, the meta product will always be the one that forms, and it takes longer as well, provided you have to have high temperatures for it to undergo further nitration. So a deactivating group, the problem with the deactivating group is that it never creates, so it only creates positive charges in two instances, in ortho and in para positions. But the problem is that it does not have enough energy to have nitro groups right next to each other because of the electron withdrawing nature. So it ends up forming the meta structure rather than ortho or para structures. So the energy required for it to be stable is much less in meta structure than in ortho or para structures. So this is the reason why nitro group is a meta director and a deactivator. So let me write it down. A CH3 group and an OCH3 group are activators. A NO2 group is a deactivator. Activators are ortho-para directors. So they end up directing the compound to form an ortho position or para position. A deactivator always pushes it towards meta position. So it's a meta director. So that's the difference between these two structures. So in the next lecture we will see why halogens do not behave the same way as activators or deactivators and why they have an exception. So with that we end lecture 1.